All right, so I just reread the March 22nd update because that's the one that confirmed there was another expansion coming. I don't know if there was one in between. I don't know. But it made a lot more sense to me as I get more invested in Guild Wars 2. So I am looking forward to reading this. This came out yesterday, June 22nd. I don't know when this is going to go live on YouTube, but we are filming this now. And I am about to finish up immediately after this on stream. I'm going to finish up Tyria for the first time, the story. Trying to find out some Zhaitan stuff. I've already played End of Dragons on my main. I story skipped through to get to the gameplay, which I've really adored. And so I am in the last zone. I tried paying attention to the story in only that expansion, but it doesn't really make sense without all this. So I'm working my way back through, and I'm having an absolute blast doing it. So let's get into it. All right. Keep myself from AFKing out in the background. Greetings, Tyrians. Guild Wars 2 director Josh Grouch Davis here. And we're back with the latest updates on Guild Wars 2 development. In our March studio update, which we just read, we confirmed big plans for Guild Wars 2's future. The return of Living World Season 1. Can't wait to get into it. Which includes a new strike mission and challenge mode. New Cantha explorable zone and story content, Steam launch, regular profession updates, and the next expansion. I think I watched Lorenity do some open world meta or something tied to, I don't know, something that it was awesome. So I'm enjoying all this. I just don't always know what I'm looking at. Now, we also include some updates on ongoing efforts like upgrading the game to DirectX 11 and world restructuring. However, we have a confession to make. While we've been much more transparent about our development priorities over the last year, we must admit we've been keeping some secrets from you. On the bright side, you're going to learn about a few of them today. Sorry, not sorry. Today's update is hefty. Hefty. So, I've enlisted the support from multiple members of the dev team to help relay on all the details. We'll be talking about upcoming strike missions, reward changes, the work we're doing to address player pain points, and how we're making raids more accessible, invisible bouncy houses and birthday parties, and our next professions update. Intrigued? Let's dig in. God, I wish these were live. I wish they pre-record, gave us a video version. And their video versions feel so passionate, they feel so meaningful, they feel like they really care, but they feel, at the same time, compared to Final Fantasy that's had, 90 million of them, they've settled into a pace where they're very polished and they're just very good on the camera, and they do them live, and it just comes from practice. And so having watched World of Warcraft get to the point where it always feels like community posts are received really mixed, if not totally negative, I think a lot of that comes from lack of practice, especially when they have to deliver bad news. And so my one thing here would be this is great. I would love to see them slowly, when they feel it's possible, move to this being in a video format so that we can really remind ourselves that they are people. We can see and hear their voices. They can show us actual in-game kind of screenshots and footage and things like that, and really help us be reminded that devs are happy to be playing the game too, and not ever wonder, for example, if the devs even play the game, if the devs even do the things we're doing. I think events like that are, as somebody that sees the difference between World of Warcraft, that really lacks those, in my opinion, and Final Fantasy, that if anything does more of them than I can even catch, because I don't always catch the community events. I would love to see more. They do a lot of cool community stuff, but more. Okay. End of Dragon Strike missions. Hi all, it's Cameron Rich, lead systems designer for Guild Wars 2. With Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons, we endeavored to expand on the concept of strike missions. One of the biggest changes was the addition of challenge modes. In terms of design intent, normal mode acts as an accessible stepping stone towards more difficult content. I've done normal strike raid type content. I haven't been doing any challenge modes. Whereas challenge modes push players to showcase their mastery over the combat system and requires a higher level of group coordination. We're happy to report that both the normal and challenge mode versions of strikes are fulfilling their intended purposes. We've seen a significant increase in the number of players playing strike missions for the very first time. and challenge modes are testing the skill and coordination of our more experienced players. And while life is good, it could be better. Strike missions rewards have been an ongoing topic of community discussion since the release of Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons, and, wouldn't you know it, we've been listening. On June 28th, my god, it's the 23rd, we'll be taking another pass on the rewards for completing both normal and challenge mode strike missions. To start, the amount of gold that can be earned from completing a strike mission each week will be doubled. Gold is a currency that you just kind of always need in this game, and it doesn't feel good when you find out that somebody has optimized really lame content to make substantially more money than highly coordinated content, since it's something that matters. Final Fantasy Guild doesn't really matter. No, World of Warcraft, the gold farming is kind of already segregated off, and the active selling runs, I think, has an unhealthy position in that community. So I don't really know if there's anything to be learned from that community. I think they need to kind of reevaluate what gold should mean. So here's the updated breakdown. Aether? Do you guys call it Aether? Do you call it Aether? 14's taught me it's Aether. I used to call it Aether. Aetherblade Hideout, 2 gold. Challenge mode, additional 2 gold. That's 4 total. Zunlai Jade Junkyard, 2 gold. Challenge mode, additional 2 gold. To put this in perspective, my friends that play a lot really don't consider anything a gold farm unless it's making at least 10 gold an hour. You're looking more closer to 20. In Final Fantasy, a base gameplay is probably getting you somewhere in the ballpark of 100,000 gil per hour. Things like PvP drop you down to like 60. And you can easily double that, and then crafters and gatherers can try to really max that out, and they can take an hour and really dial it up to hundreds of thousands per hour. In World of Warcraft, that can vary heavily based on the content you're running, so I don't really have a concept of what like Mythic Plus players feel they're bringing in per hour. But when you look at like lax and things like that, you're dealing in thousands of gold, and a monthly token to purchase a month subscription is roughly equivalent to, I think, like 170,000. I would put it at about a tenth of World of Warcraft. And so I would say that like 100,000 gold in Final Fantasy, 100,000 gold in World of Warcraft is probably about 1 million gil in 14, though they have very different uses. And 1 million gil in Final Fantasy 14 is probably about, from a use standpoint, I feel like maybe about somewhere between probably maybe like 50 to 70 gold. When you have 100 gold, that's substantial. You're not loaded, but it's substantial. When you have millions of gil, multiple millions in Final Fantasy, you're fine. You don't need anything, but there are people a lot wealthier than you. And if you have 100,000 gold in World of Warcraft, you're fine, but it is a very spendable amount of money. I run with around 300,000 or 400,000 gold in World of Warcraft. I run with about 30 to 40 million gil in Final Fantasy. And as a brand new player that has no idea what's going on in Guild Wars, I'm sitting on like 70 gold right now. But if I start diving into anything I want, that's going to go away very, very, very rapidly. So hopefully that provides like the world's tiniest bit of context as somebody that at least dabbles across all 3 games. So it looks like they're taking us up to 2 gold for normal, 2 gold, 4 gold, 4 gold, and then of course challenge mode's basically doubling that. Now weekly challenge mode completions will also award 1 antique summoning stone per strike mission. Additionally, a new high-end reward is being added to challenge mode strike missions, the Imperial Everbloom Infusion. There will be 2 ways to obtain it. The account-bound version can be purchased from the strike mission rewards vendor Zazzle in Arborstone once you have completed all 4 End of Dragons challenge modes. Completing each challenge mode strike mission provides chances to obtain an unbound version of the Imperial Everbloom Infusion that can be freely traded for a total of 4 chances per week. This is a heavily account-bound based game, so just kind of keep in mind that like lockouts and stuff becomes kind of a weird concept when you start to talk about how many characters some people have. You guys are saying legendaries are like 2K. Okay. To buy top-end gear in Final Fantasy is very, very cheap. To buy top-end gear in World of Warcraft is like when it's relevant, it's very, very expensive. So like gearing's not a perfect comparison, but that's good to know. All right. We're also making improvements to how we polish these encounters. In early June, we announced that we were delaying the release of the Harvest Temple Challenge mode from June 7th to June 28th, right around the corner, to give us some additional time to test and tune the content. Bugs are inevitable in game development, but we want players to feel confident that the new strike missions are high quality and stable. We've learned a lot from the last 3 challenge mode releases and have identified several improvements to our development and quality assurance testing processes and how we leverage our internal team of developer playtesters. The team for Guild Wars is substantially smaller than the resources that Final Fantasy and WoW can bring to bear. All of which are being put into place for the Harvest Temple Challenge mode and future releases. We always are looking for ways to improve the strike mission experience in Guild Wars 2, and we're committed to supporting the game mode as a core element of endgame PvE. We share the excitement that we've seen in the community for strike missions and look forward to seeing players experience the Harvest Temple Challenge mode on June 28th. Now, I'd like to shift gears a bit and talk about some of the work we're doing to address players' pain points. Strengthening the core. Shortly after the release of Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons, we restructured our dev team to support the new initiatives we've been discussing with all of you, efforts like Living World Season 1, Steam, etc. However, one of our new initiatives wasn't scheduled to start right away, leaving us with a small group of developers that needed something to do. We knew that this would be a great opportunity to address some smaller projects that have been sitting on our backlog. Things that would benefit veterans and new players alike. Now that the cat is out of the bag, we can also give this team the credit for the Special Forces training area and dungeon reward changes that were released on June 7th. Ooh, I haven't done those yet. Here is a preview of the next set of improvements they're releasing on June 28th. Dude, where's my mouse cursor? We're addressing a new option to the General Options tab that allows you to choose from 3 cursor contrast modes: off, low, and high. I hope this means they can also allow you to adjust other people's spell effects. The settings menu I want to be a lot bigger. I'm aware that like Final Fantasy's done a great job of every time we request a change to the settings menu, they've largely given it to us eventually. It sometimes takes a while, but what that means is that the settings menu is like 2 menus, and each menu has tabs across the top, which have tabs down the side, which have drop-down sliders, scroll bars, like toggle buttons, check boxes. And so there are times where like I see a video from a new Final Fantasy creator that's like, oh my god, did you know you could do this? Yeah. But the problem is, once you set a setting, you set it and forget it, because you can cloud save your things. So even if you take a break from the game, your settings save. And so then what happens is somebody sees you streaming, or a friend comes over and sees the way you play, and they go, oh my god, I love that thing about your UI. That fixes something that I have been complaining about to like my friends, my family, my guildmates. I've been complaining to like my spouse who doesn't even play this game. I complained to the mailman about it, and you're telling me I could change it? How do I do that? And you're like, oh, I don't know. I think I changed that setting like 5 years ago. I don't remember where it is. And you have to go navigate 65 options menus. So as much as I'm asking for it in Guild Wars, I am aware that what I'm asking for will come with its own set of problems if they were like, you know what? Chris is in charge. We're improving the options. It's still not... There's a whole other problem when you start to have too many options. Now, these contrast settings are intended to improve the visibility of your mouse cursor, making it harder to lose track and easier to find if you do. These should come in handy for areas of the game with a lot of on-screen action, like raids, meta events, world bosses, world v world. Repair despair. Now, what repairs mean in MMOs changes game to game. Now, prior to 2014, there was a small fee to repair broken armor after players were defeated in battle. Ultimately, we decided we didn't want to punish players this way, so we removed the repair costs. Guild Wars players and WoW players are like, you did what? However, the chore of repairing broken armor remained. It's been a mild inconvenience throughout the years. We're happy to report that after June 28th, you'll no longer need to repair your armor after being defeated. The mechanic is kaput. But we didn't want to melt down Tyria's anvils for scrap. There's something about hammering on one that gets us pumped for adventuring, you know? After the update, repair canisters and anvils will grant a small bonus to your health and defense with a 12-hour duration. The enhancement will work in PvE and World v World, but not PvP. This starts to get me to derail a little bit, but repair costs, vendor trash, quest givers being somebody you have to come back to town, those things are not there to just inconvenience you. They are there because games like this are very social. And so as a mechanic, yes, they do inconvenience you. And they also mean things that, like, dying has a consequence. Not a bad consequence, but a consequence. Dying should not undo the fun, but not dying should feel rewarding. And part of that is the lack of a consequence there. The act of coming back to town, the act of creating player hubs, is what makes an MMO feel special, even if you're not interacting with those. It makes it feel immersive and whole and living and breathing. So the active repair costs, when you start to mitigate those with the ability to self-repair in Final Fantasy, the ability to repair on a mount in World of Warcraft, the act of going to a market board, which you can do in your housing district in 14 to avoid the capital cities, or on a mount in World of Warcraft to avoid capital cities, or you can just list directly from your inventory in Guild Wars, takes away an opportunity to be reminded that I'm sharing this world with other people and that it is a living, breathing thing. And so, at first, a quality of life thing is quality. Who doesn't want quality? When you make a rippling effect of all these changes, I actually disagree with that as a general trend. Because that is what makes the world feel like a world. I escaped my world to go into Tyria, and if Tyria is just something where I log in, I immediately teleport to a boss, the boss dies, if I fail on the boss, nothing bad happens, the boss dies almost every time anyway. Once the boss goes down, loot shoots into my inventory, I vendor what I want from my inventory, I sell on the market board what I want from my inventory, and then I just move on with my life. My gear never needs upgrading, my gear never needs repairs, gear never needs maintenance, it's set it and forget it forever and ever. Something has been lost. And so, yeah, they can be an anti-inflationary tool with gil syncs and things like that. Yes, they can be an inconvenience for players to make things feel meaningful, but also they're just part of the world. So I'm not sure I agree with this change. Just as a general rule, as somebody that gets concerned about certain quality of life things and trends within World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy, I get a little concerned when you do this. Repairs were already something you could do at like any hub. There's different items, so like I'm not sure they're a perfect example, but just as a general trend, what happens when now that repairs are not a pain point anymore, people say like, hey, maybe we should remove teleport costs. New World had a resource that you use to teleport, and then they basically nerfed that into the ground, and now that resource doesn't mean anything. And so now when the game gives you that resource, it doesn't matter. And so if this becomes on demand, then do we now complain about the next thing that becomes on demand, and the next thing that becomes on demand, and the next thing that becomes on demand? So I already thought it was weird to find out they didn't cost anything. So to tell you where my point of disagreement comes from, it's not this post. I already thought it was weird that it didn't cost any form of currency when the game has so many currencies and so many things. I already thought it was weird. So now to tell me the answer is not to find a way to make repairing an intriguing and fun mechanic, because I don't know that this does that. Maybe it does. To say effectively we're removing it and there will be 12-hour buffs that just come from, oh, it's like eating food, but you eat an anvil. Like, I don't know. That's just my opinion. You're welcome to yours. Okay. To anvil or not to anvil? To totally, I mean, well, you have to anvil. It's a 12-hour duration, and when you log out, I assume the timer doesn't stop. So, like, you have to anvil. It's not to not anvil. You have to anvil. The idea, seeing my friends that are in full legendaries on all their characters and have nothing left to farm, now knowing that their gear will never ever break down, wear out, or repair, like, okay. Cool. So I guess gear progression just, there's not even like the ghost of gear progression. Their gear never wears out. They've literally solved it. Oh, I just play on this character that's been loaned. It's like playing on a dev character. All right. Improving raid accessibility. While raids are exciting in-game content, they have a high barrier to entry and can be difficult to break into. Fact. And that doesn't mean players aren't interested in trying them. In fact, our regular player surveys, raids are often the top content that players say they would like to experience, but for one reason or another, haven't been able to do so. We want to break down some of those barriers and experiment with a systematic approach to making raid content more accessible. Be very careful with what you're about to next say. Final Fantasy suffers from a gap from dungeons, which are basically guaranteed clears, to dungeons and raids, which are basically guaranteed clears, to extremes, which competent players don't find very hard, but players who are trying to learn that gap, it's an enormous jump, and then that gets you into Savages, which gets you into Ultimates. But there is a gap there for new players. World of Warcraft shoved looking for group raids into this gap, and World of Warcraft players do not universally rejoice that change. If you want to make your day worse and you don't want to go out to Twitter or Reddit and troll for somebody being a dick, then I highly recommend you download World of Warcraft and do a looking for group raid. So just be very careful with what they say next, because the general concept of creating a stepping stone there is incredible. Absolutely necessary. Let's find out what their plan is. Our answer is the Emboldened system. An optional mode that progressively ramps up a player's damage, health, and healing output each time they fail an encounter. Final Fantasy calls that an echo. Here's how that works. Each week, one of the 7 existing raid wings will be set to Emboldened mode. Upon entry, raid members will gain their first stack of the Emboldened enhancement, which grants additional health, damage output, improved healing to aid in their battle against each boss. Each time the raid wipes against that boss, is there a minimum amount? So in Final Fantasy, you have to survive for like 3 minutes to stop you from just wipe, stack it up. They will receive another stack of Emboldened, granting up to 100% additional health, 50% increased additional damage, and 50% increased healing output. Upon defeating the boss, the Emboldened stat will reset to 1. The Emboldened mode is entirely optional. For those who prefer a challenge, it can be turned off by visiting the Emboldened mode inside that raid. Is it the same rewards? Deadly encounter mechanics will still be deadly. The player will still need to respect them. But this system will give new raiders a chance to ease into learning them. Note, there are some restrictions to this feature. For one, the Emboldened system will be disabled when challenge mode is activated. Makes sense. Additionally, certain prestigious achievements are not obtainable when under the effect of Emboldened enhancement. Logical. Undefeated, Zero's wrong, slippery stumbling, down. Yeah, whatever. I don't know what those are, but obviously. We're also making a few small changes to the existing looking for group categories to create separate spaces for new and experienced players. Looking for group training and looking for group experienced. We hope these changes encourage players to take their first step into Guild Wars 2 in-game PvE content and join the tight-knit raiding community. If you're new to raids and ready to get started, there are some great guides and resources from the web at our friends over at Snowcrows, Metabattle, Hardstuck, and Muckluck Labs. Okay, so my initial issue is this does not affect loot. And for a game that loot is one-directional, you never fall behind because of the patches. So once you're in full exotics on a character, you never go back. You're never downgraded like you are in World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy for falling behind the item level. Once you then push to Ascended, that's kind of it. You've nailed it. You have the option to pursue Legendary. Once you're full Legendary, you are done. And so I'm not sure I agree that simply just rewarding people by just making things a percentage easier is a correct answer. Because this doesn't necessarily mean I got better at a mechanic. This just says it died faster, people out-healed my mistakes, and I lived through things I shouldn't have. What I would prefer is something that tells me how I did. So something that tells me when I'm using my abilities correctly, something that tells me things about my build that could be more cohesive. This game requires basically third-party tools to figure out builds for new players. It's very, very filled with like noob traps. If you just read the tooltips, it's like, that sounds good, and then it's not. How does my gearing benefit me? And then in addition to that, what did I do wrong? And so a better example of like you got hit by this many avoidable mechanics. There is outgoing damage in a raid that is just meant to make sure healers have something to heal. The Guild Wars 2 is not a traditional Trinity game. It doesn't have tanks, healers, DPS. There are people putting out heals. There are people that have kind of an enmity, hate, threat type thing based on kind of their toughness mechanics, but it's not really a Trinity. So group comps varies wildly when you compare it to World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy, where things are substantially more structured. And so what I would prefer is for you to have a little more individual accountability associated with this system. So what I would like to see this evolve into, well, yes, we want to make sure you don't die. That's great. It's going to do that. What I would like to see is a feedback loop that allows me to pursue and possibly be rewarded for improving. There are a lot of people who don't want to suck at a game, but they don't want to have to go do homework and write a research paper to figure it out. They got off work, they had a long day, they're trying to play to be entertained and relaxed. They're not trying to suck. That's not their intent. Nobody wants to be bad. But the desire to want to be good has to outpace the cost of what it takes to become good. Now, once you are good, you're like, oh, it's super easy. I just use this skill set and knowledge I already have. Why aren't they doing it? Because they don't have what you have. They are somewhere you used to be. So what I would prefer is mechanics. I like things like DPS meters that tell me something like, but not limited to, how did you do in the past? How did you do this time? How do other people that are similar to you do? So that you have a point of reference, so that I can just see like, I'm in the ballpark of the average player, or oh my god, I'm doing really well today, or wow, I'm really off. And then when you are off, things that say, you know, actually what we find is people with a similar build to you are getting about 20% of their damage from AoEs in this particular encounter. We see you have AoEs and you use them like nearly the maximum number of times your cooldown allowed in the fight duration. Perhaps your AoE placement is something you could work on. Right? They're not playing the game for you. Now that can be an optional screen at the end of the encounter. So players who don't want to improve, they've had a long day, they want to move on, they got their clear, they move on. Nobody's forcing you to get better. But a lot of times what I find is when people are bad at the game, a huge percentage of those players would be willing to improve if it didn't require going out and downloading 65 Excel modifiers to look through spreadsheets and figure all this out and be ranted and raved at by some elitist on a Discord server. They want to be better. Just make that obtainable. And then in addition to that, stop kicking their mistakes onto other players. Kicking up the healing output on somebody else and kicking up my life says that if I get hit by things, I'll survive long enough for you to heal me for my mistake. I don't learn about the mistake. So what I would prefer is something that either counts up my mistakes and tells me and maybe rewards me for not doing them. Oh my god, I get a chance at a mini pet, and the number of chances I get are raffle tickets, and those raffle tickets are tied to the number of stacks I don't get across an encounter. We get the clear. Wow, you did it without getting hit a single time. That's incredible. Here you go. Or something like a Final Fantasy twice come, thrice come ruin system, where what you do is you build up basically a probationary stack. That probationary stack says don't get hit for a certain amount of time. We're good. Mistakes are mistakes. You're learning. Or if you keep getting hit by avoidable stuff back to back to back, we're just going to kill you. You're just going to die straight into a down state. Straight past the down state. You just get yeeted. Because what that does is that forces player accountability. Because you can't just say, well, I didn't get a heal. We can't have healed you. You were at full life. Well, then why did I die? Because you got smacked by his axe twice after he held it in the air on the left side of the arena twice, and we all ran right except for you. Oh. So when he holds it up on the left side, I just got to be on the right side? Yeah. Oh. So I would rather see systems like this encourage education, since education appears to be the intent. The intent doesn't seem to be, we just want to increase the percentage of players that can clear this because clearing percentage is important. We want to increase the accessibility of this because we spent time on it and players need more content, and this is content, and we're just going to lower the bar until they can run through it. The intent here is phrased as people are afraid to get in because it's hard, and we want to make it something that they can overcome. So this should be an educational opportunity, not we just lowered the bar until people cleared it. Great. So now people who are bad still feel like they want to avoid raids, and they do one raid every week, and the raid they do is whichever one's in emboldened mode. You didn't encourage them to actually take a step into non-emboldened content because they still don't know why they're dying. They still don't know why the other players are complaining about them. They still don't know how their rotation works or how their build works. Did you have your anvil buff? Did you pick stats on all your gear? Did you use all your abilities? Tell me something that is actionable. What hit me? Let me turn down other players' spell effects enough that I can see what hit me. Oh. When that guy has glowing wings or whatever, he's about to ruin the ground around him. Tell me how to get better. I think it's great that they have a support system from their creators and the communities around them that can help. I followed Muckluck guides when I got into raiding. But like Muckluck guides are straight and to the point, and the problem with a summary is that it assumes a base knowledge. So there are things not said in Muckluck guides that then I had to be taught when I was in a raid group that was patient with me because I knew them. I really like this game, guys. I feel like I'm complaining about this one. I was really happy about the March one. I really am happy, and I'm excited to be in this game. I really do like it. Know your boundaries. Hey, everyone. It's your friendly neighborhood senior game designer, Nick Hernandez. And I'm here to talk about an update we're making to story instance boundaries. Instance boundaries are the red outlines around the playable space in story instances. I've had some negative issues with these. If you've played through the personal story or living world content, I expect you've probably been unceremoniously kicked from an instance for having the audacity to walk an inch over the boundary. Unfortunately, this means you lose your progress in the instance and have to start over. Yes, frustrating. You believe it. Now, to address this, we've applied a soft instanced boundary tech to story instances. If you played through Guild Wars 2 Into Dragons, you've probably seen it in action. With this change, all instances now push them back. Yes, to acceptable bounds of the instance, instead of rudely booting them. Better. Imagine if every story instance took place inside of an invisible bouncy house. Only with the associated birthday party clowns or birthday. Without... Okay. That about does it for the June. Good, good. I think that's... Yeah, it's an improvement. Right? Like, it still feels weird that you're running across a field you've been in before and you smack it. But it is incredibly frustrating, especially in the more narrative instances, to get tossed back. That's way better. Now, that about does it for the core updates in June 28th, but don't worry, you're going to hear from us again. Now, June Profession Updates Preview. Hello! This is Solar. God, I want faces. Give me faces. Lead Skills and Balance Designer. I'm here on behalf of the Skills and Balance team with a preview of our upcoming Summer Profession Update on June 28th. Banners, Spotter, Fury. I don't know what any of these words mean. One major goal for this update is for the same build and equipment to work both in and out of organized play. Unique stacking bonuses to attributes, especially precision, have been a problem here. Their existence means that when playing in coordinated groups with Spotter and Banner of Discipline, your critical hit chance is almost 10% higher than when playing alone. We saw an opportunity here to progress one of our other long-standing goals, raising the floor on player effectiveness and damage output without further raising the ceiling. So for anybody that is not familiar with these terms in MMOs, since we're talking all about MMOs today, the floor is the minimum acceptable skill to succeed in a game. The floor is the ability to just clear the content. The ceiling is the theoretical max. Now, oftentimes the ceiling is associated with damage meters, it's associated with clear times, but effectively what it is the floor is where I can make it through the game. I find the floor in Guild Wars very, very low. Any of you that have watched me leveling my Necro through story recognize that I have not yet figured out how any of my skills, abilities, or gear works, nor do I care, because the floor is low enough that I can focus on the narrative elements and be immersed in the voice acting and immersed in it, and I can have a good time with you. And if it takes me longer to kill something, that's fine. We're chatting, we're listening to all the other random voice acting in the game. We're having a good time because the floor is low enough that I could let somebody who's never played a game before in their life get through the content. And that's a very good thing. The base game should have a very low floor in a game. When you add something like button bloat to a game, you add skill complexity, you add dense loot systems or something like that, you run the risk of increasing the floor. And if you increase the floor, you actually lock out new players, because remember, everybody starts somewhere. There was a day that you were bad at video games, and there was a day you were bad at Guild Wars 2. Maybe you came into Guild Wars 2 so far ahead because you played other MMOs. That day was 5 minutes long, but there was a point in time where you didn't know. The low floor is incredibly important, especially in things like base games, free trials, entry-level content, narrative content. The ceiling is where the veterans live. They thrive there. This is where, oh my god, last time I did 6,896,000,000 damage, and this time I beat it by 1. And so it is somewhere where you optimize, you work on group comp, you cleared it in 6 minutes and 31 seconds. We got it down to 6:29. Way to go, guys. We are talking about things like where players get so involved in this that they can often say, gosh, I can't believe you brought this job spec class to it, because that makes our comp 2.5% worse. That is what's up there, but it is incredibly fun when you're so invested in a game that there is something more for you to learn, and the ceiling is the point that sets the cap on the amount you can learn. So if we add something like simplicity to the game, maybe we just universally across the game double everybody's health in all content at all times. We unfortunately, while we do lower the floor and make it easier for people to get through content because their health increased, we unfortunately also lower the ceiling, which means that veterans get to a point where they've done everything they can do, they've improved at everything they want to improve at, and they burn out in this game. New players are the lifeblood of a game. Veteran players will burn out, they will play other games, they will leave. Veterans are the players who have not yet bought inventory upgrades, they've not yet purchased the expansion, they've not yet gone out and told their friends that they need to play this game. I had a friend who, he got his character's birthday and he texted me, and I realized, oh my god, I brought a friend back to Guild Wars 2 who played at launch 6 days after you guys talked me into downloading this game. New players are incredibly important to the growth of a community, but veteran players are important too. Veteran players are the ones who teach us. Veteran players are the ones who help the devs inform balance. They are the ones who stay there when when content cycles actually dip. They are the ones who are loyal fans. They ended up at the ceiling through time. Some players rush through that progress. Some players get there very, very slowly by accident. But both are incredibly important. Ideally, you are finding ways to increase your ceiling in a game. Increase the amount that somebody who wants to nerd out about something can. Nerding out about things is fun. You want to nerd out about sports, video games, comic books, I don't care. Something in your life should be something you are so passionate about that somebody calls you a nerd, and it doesn't directly affect the ability to pay your rent, it doesn't affect the significance of the relationship with your spouse, it doesn't matter. There should be something in your life that if you need to take a break from it, you can, but that it's just this immense place that you can dip back to, and it's about fun and joy and love, and skill ceilings are what set the cap on how much somebody can nerd out about a game. That's awesome. Maybe the ceiling doesn't affect you in a particular game, but the ceiling affects you in something. There is something that to be an expert, there is a cap. That is the ceiling. But the floor is also something we want to spread that as much as possible, because that determines how many levels you are allowed to care about this game, from I've never tried it before, but I'm thinking of giving it a shot, all the way up to there is nothing left for me to do. So I just wanted to kind of define those terms and sort of throwing it out here just in case you've never heard them before. Now, in this update, these unique stacking attribute bonuses are being changed to provide boons instead. We're making the critical hit chance from them much more accessible by increasing the critical hit chance bonus from Fury Boon from 20% to 25% in PvE, and by adding an additional 5% crit hit chance to many professions traits in locations easily accessible to power builds. More access to key boons. Having high uptime on critical boons is the strongest indicator of success when playing in group content. Might, Fury, Quickness, and Alacrity all strongly define your ability to successfully tackle challenge modes in this game. With this update, we're continuing to expand options for several professions and elite specializations, creating more Alacrity and Quickness support builds. We've also looked at Fury and Might access across professions and have introduced or increased sources of Might. We've changed several traits from self-only sources of Fury to now share Fury with allies. This means that damage builds will help maintain uptime on these boons and reduce the burden on support roles. So one of the concerns I have about hearing that they are increasing the number of things that buff is that as a new player to this game, I already really struggle with how big the gap is in the DPS curve. Somebody who is operating on the floor of their build can be doing like 6 damage, and somebody who is operating on the ceiling of their build can be doing like 50 billion per second. Like, it is literally like 500 to 40,000 or something like that. So I do wonder, like, is this to help bring that down? Because if it's just a flat buff, I don't see how the people who are up at like, 50 million don't just go even higher. I don't know what that is. So, like, a flat percentage increase is a percentage multiplier wherever you are on that growth curve. So yes, it buffs the people at the bottom. It does. It moves them up about 20%. Maybe they're at a 1, so it moves them to a 1.2. But now the person that's at the ceiling, that was at a level 100, is now at 120. So the gap has actually gotten larger. So I do wonder how they're going to balance encounters to make sure that groups that are filled with people who are a little bit newer to the game are still going to be able to clear it, because they're a little bit stronger, but not make it so much so that now the groups where people are all at the top are just blasting it down, because every single player is now bringing these additional percentage things to bear. So I don't know enough about the balance of all the different classes in this game, but flat percentage increases do not just lower the floor by making that function just stronger, but they also lower that ceiling, because now the ceiling players are just tearing stuff up. So I think maybe instead I would look at like tying this to maybe their emboldened system, or something like that, and then maybe tying it to normal, and then it goes away in challenge modes, so that as you approach the ceiling, this buff becomes effectively less effective, because top-end players may be encouraged to not do emboldened modes, and they may only do normal modes sometimes, and they may really focus on challenge modes. And so and then playing alone, buffing it when playing alone is fine, because one of the problems in a game that has a lot of like party buff support roles is that when those support roles aren't present, your build no longer feels relevant. And so allowing you to better take care of yourself, there is an issue in like Trinity games, for example. How do you make tanks who are meant to be defensive feel defensive, where their job's not outgoing damage, but to be able to take the hits, still feel effective out in the world? And healers whose job is to heal their friends, how do they feel effective out in the world? So like, in solo content, you do inherently function different than you do in a group. So, maybe this just means less support roles. So maybe this is just flex, because maybe there's a cap on what these are. In which case, it's not a big deal. It's just creating more group comp variety. In which case, it's just a good thing. But coming from games that have trinities, this is something that's concerning. Maybe it's not a bad thing in Guild Wars at all. I literally don't know on this one. But, like, I know that when I joined a raid group my first week, they were basically carrying me. And then I was slowly building towards what was acceptable. And my friends that are really good at the game have a second group that they only run with experienced players, and they tear stuff down. And some of them sometimes sound a little bored as they talk about that. And I don't see how just giving them more stats helps them feel less bored. That seems more bored. I have, however, heard that some of the metas tied to End of Dragons are even hard for very experienced players. So if that is true, then maybe this isn't a big deal. Maybe you just move them over to different content for where they get their challenge. So this is just an area that, like, I just need more information on. Now, a present for each profession. This update is focused on adding or improving skills, traits, or weapons in each profession in a way that introduces new builds to try. It was important to us that there be something exciting in this update for every profession. Here's a small selection, not an exhaustive list, of what to expect on the 28th, and then they give something to everybody. I play a Banner Warrior because that's an easy thing to drag along. And so banner skills have been overhauled to provide boons, so it just makes me better. Through deploying banners, an update to the Warhorn's charge skill, and the tactics trait Martial Cadence, warriors can provide quickness to allies. So I assume that I just got better when I'm not good at the game. We'll be releasing the full profession updates in the patch notes on June 24th. I look forward to being educated enough on the game that I'll be able to read those and understand what the hell I'm looking at, to give you time to comb through them in detail and plan ahead for the new update. Stay tuned for updates on World v World development later this week. This is something that, like, in games is always like a really fun time to theory craft and a really dramatic time to see people go, well, that's not fair. This job's amazing, and this job got nerfed into the ground because they got less pros than like it's such an emotional time. So it's interesting to see how long they want the emotional time to be. It's high emotion, so there's high reward being a part of theory crafting communities. But the 24th to the 28th is, so you got 4 days to decide whether or not your job has the sky crashing down or you are about to be anointed into a god. Until next time, that's it for this edition. We'll be back in early to mid-July, so fast, to share our development roadmap through the end of the summer. And to those that made it all the way to the end, we salute you. We look forward to seeing you in-game on June 28th. Thank you for your continued support. Josh, Cam, Nick, Solar, and the Guild Wars 2 team. More of these. More so than patch notes, this helps us understand their intent. This helps us understand that if something doesn't land perfectly, do they agree with us on that and we can expect it to continually update, or are they like, no, that's what we meant it to be? Is this ineptitude in when something kind of misses the mark wildly, or is it just, actually it just needs a lot more tuning than you would think? And when something lands beautifully, is that an accident and we run the risk of seeing it go away later? Or is that things landing and working together because the dev team has heard us, they've thought about it, they are the developers, they've thought about what it should be as a game developer because they know more about that side of the equation than we do, and they have put something in the game that is truly right where it needs to be. So consistent updates, consistent communication are two of the most important things in managing a community like this, especially since they don't have like a lot of retention mechanics and subscription-based stuff to kind of keep us otherwise. So you got to be in Guild Wars because you want to be in Guild Wars. It's very easy to quit. So give us a reason to stick around. I think this is awesome, and I would love to see them continue to do these and continue to help us understand what they want from the game and what they think we want from the game, so we can be like, yeah, you heard me correctly, or actually I think you may have misunderstood what we were trying to say. So I think that's a really good thing, and the fact that they're doing another one just a month later is freaking awesome. Kinda.